Hi, I'm Danny Pellegrino from the Everything Iconic podcast. And who doesn't love a classic burger from McDonald's? That's right. McDonald's classic burgers are hotter, juicier, and tastier than ever. The patties are cooked to juicy perfection. I love the cheese perfectly melted on top. I love the Big Mac that has a special sauce in every bite. I love the pillowy, soft, golden bun. So in the words of the Hamburglar, which I believe means grab McDonald's best burgers ever before Hamburglar does at a McDonald's near you.
1-800-Flowers.com is more than your birthday, anniversary, or just because gift-giving destination. We put our hearts into everything we do to help you celebrate all life's special occasions with friends and family. From our farmers and bakers, florists and makers, everything from 1-800-Flowers is made with love every step of the way, because we know that nothing is more important than delivering a smile. To learn more, visit 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST.
Welcome guys to this week's Heavy Metal Tones with me, your podcast host Tony Evans. This truly is my favourite time of the week. I'm off from work, the house is relatively empty, and I get to sit down and chat with you guys. So it's a highlight of my week, and I really am glad you guys are still listening. I'm getting new listeners every week, which is good. I can't believe it, considering I sort of want to listen to me babble on. But anyway, this week's episode came to me a few weeks ago. I've been thinking about it for a little while, but it bubbled along. I was listening. It was just sort of leading into the Iron Maiden tribute band we went and saw last weekend. Sorry, the weekend before. And I was sort of listening to Iron Maiden, walking around, on the way to work and home from work, around the house. And I was thinking, when did... I've jokingly before said to people that Iron Maiden is now sort of a soft band, which is an insult to them and an insult to their listeners and to me, really. I was thinking, when did heavy become extreme? And then at what point in my life, particularly, and probably a lot of your lives out there, do you suddenly realise that the things you were listening to in your youth are no longer is no longer as heavy as you thought it was? There's a classic. Okay, so I sort of did some research into this, and I'm thinking to myself, where would it all begin? Now, it seems to me, looking through the annals of musical history, that it's not a modern phenomena, and I'm sure you people out there would realise it's not a modern phenomena. But way back with choral music, in the when we just started to write music down in and around the 13th century, probably a little bit before, we were playing choral pastoral music. The notes they were using were limited because of the instruments that they were using them on. Therefore, they didn't have the range that they have now. That bubbled along, and I'm sure that there were people out there that thought this is too loud and too hard and too heavy. I don't think there were words heavy back then, but you know what I mean, too against God, I would probably say. And then it comes into your classical, or the classical movement, with pastoral music that's very Christian related, very religious, heavy religiosity to it, and so it's all harmonies with angels and praising the God and so on, and then from that, when we then our instruments are coming more into the fore, like the lute takes on more of a part in music. Stringed instruments are becoming more prevalent. There are the harpsichord into piano and so forth. Percussive instruments are more in the use, and so they then have more expansion. And because they've got more expansion, they can explore the range of music. And there are, like there with all humanity, there are people out there that want to explore the boundaries of where they can go. Others were more dangerous back then because if you played the devil's note, you could be imprisoned, and I think even to some extent, I think there were some societies that would put you to death. I mean, travelling mummers, which was the original name for actors that travelled around the UK in the 14th, 15th century, they could be put to death for acting in streets. So if you can do that, and then so people were pushing the boundaries, and so then we move forward and we go into sort of our more of a modern day, jazz to blues. Blues more is it's difficult to say whether blues is heavier than jazz, because jazz can be very dense. And Webster's dictionary does define heavy as a couple of options of heavy. I'll just tell you now what they say. Let me get my book open. So a great weight, difficult to lift or move. But the other one is a great density, thick or substantial, heavy grey clouds, as in such. It's a quote. So we see whereas jazz can be heavy with its musical intent, with so many unusual notes and such disparate sounds that it becomes heavy, whereas blues heavy is more it's because it's more guitar driven, and it's heavier in its lyrical notation and its content, because it's the please don't get me wrong, angry when I say it's the slave, the sadness of the slave trade, and coming out from the cotton fields and the corn and the sugar cane of America, and their story and their plight. That's where the heaviness comes, right? So I know that's musically heavy, and then what I sort of backtrack just quickly to the classical music aspect. So you have your choral music, and you have your classical, your Beethoven's, which can get quite heavy, but then there's this movement where it gets really quite dark with composers like Mahler and Liszt and Wagner. Wagner's a classic example with its ring cycle, very, very, almost chewably thick, almost palpable it's almost sticking to the palate kind of thickness with that particular composition. There's a wonderful quote from the dear Harry H. Corbett as Steptoe and Son, as Harold Steptoe, in a musical evening from the which was on broadcast on the 31st of January 1963. I am a comedy nerd as well. He is trying to play his records. Sorry, get my tea. He's trying to play his records, and his dad wants to play "Twist Again" by Chubby Checker, and Harold's trying to be all cultured and educated, and he's got his 78s, and his dad's moaning about it's all so heavy, and Harold comes up with honestly, it's a line I've used many, many times in my life, and I love it to bits. The quote is, music doesn't just soothe the savage beast, it gives you headache as well. And I absolutely love that line. And it's what it is, isn't it? It sums it up completely. So, where am I going with this? Because what I'm going is when we think that music's extreme now, and you see people, you know, I'm one of them. You know, I'm wearing my extreme metal t-shirts. I really, wrong word, 60s word, dig black death metal. I really do. I have to be obviously in the right frame of mind, but I really do. I don't dislike it. In fact, I seek it out in a lot of cases. It's because you see them then, and I don't know whether they really know where they can go from where they are now, and I'm sure that will happen. But if they were to sort of cast, you know, if they cast aspersions on someone like me, if I'm walking around the streets and I'm wearing an Iron Maiden shirt, and I have seen in forums people say Iron Maiden are boring and dull and heavy enough, and I, if you could see me, listeners, I'm rolling my eyes so much I have to bang the back of my head to get them back into position. It's just, you know, again, it's that snobbery when it comes to people's musical fractions, right? But you think about it, back in the 60s, you had Elvis, okay, so you got your blues, right? Then comes your Elvis, and it's heavy, and it's rock and roll, and it's scaring people, and he's a danger to society, right? But really, when you think about it, it's easy elevator music now, right? And it moves from there. You know, we then get this pop movements of the 60s with the Beatles and the Beach Boys, and you know, I'm not going to roll off hundreds of pop bands, but you get the idea, right? And then you get the Beatles, and they write Helter Skelter. To me, I think it's the first ever truly, really heavy song. Is Helter Skelter of the White Album, and then following that, you get this, you know, and then the kids listening to that would have gone, you know, where do you go from there? And bands start to proliferate around the UK scene. Of course, America as well, but mainly in the UK, the heavy rock scene really took off. Okay, and you get Free and Badfinger and Nazareth and Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin and Thin Lizzy. Just, I'm not going to name all, just the ones that come off the top of my head, right? And they, for let's say a decade, were the heaviest thing ever to be heard, right? They like you know, I mean, I remember my English teacher playing Badfinger. Justin probably remember this. If you're listening, Justin, he actually did reply to my Facebook page and found the Spinal Tap show, which was pretty amazing. The Saturday Night Live skit for me. But Justin, remember, teacher used to play Badfinger and Deep Purple and sort of stuff like that when you come into the classroom. Mr. King, God rest his soul if he's gone, I'm sure. He was old then. If he's not, good luck to you. Anyway, they were taking the heaviness of blues with the technologies of the day. So they were using new guitar pedals. They were recording on more up-to-date decks. So they were using Neve decks. They had, you know, using tape echo loops. They were using fuzz pedals, wah pedals, stuff that was all they were really sort of in the mix. They were really bringing the bottom end up and sort of really rattling those speakers. And of course you had things like Paste on the drums, you know, and a Who as well. Sorry, I should have said the Who. And the Who, you know, with John Entwistle's bass that would just, you know, rip your soul out at the best of times. You know, it's unbelievable bass player. And these sort of, then they were taking those sort of, and Zeppelin, I mean, everyone loves Zeppelin today. I've come on, and I know people know I don't like Zeppelin. One, maybe two albums. Anyway, it's still that really heavy blues sound, and I'm sure the people listening to that were thinking, where does it go from here? Surely this is the heaviest thing I've ever heard. Then of course that leaches from there. Interestingly enough, there's a sort of a gap. I don't think like it's not happened in music so much, maybe the late 80s, early 90s, but there's a gap where heavy became progressive. And progressive, people, listeners, please, progressive is not flowery, light, sunny motifs with 20-minute keyboard solos that go nowhere, that are just, yes, there is that aspect. and yes, I love it. But progressive can be very heavy. Honestly, they can. Bands like Boston, who people don't think are progressive, who I think they are very heavy. Supertramp, extremely sort of that sort of blues, Deep Purple meets Yes aspect. Some of Genesis, particularly some of Genesis mid era recordings, are extremely heavy. I would honestly outright say that Lamb Lights Down on Broadway is probably a proto heavy metal album. It's the greatest progressive rock album ever made. I'll argue about that with anyone, but that's what I feel. But it is heavy. It's certainly not light. So there was that sort of gap there where it was sort of a wilderness years, and then something happens. The punk happens, and punk is very heavy. Punk is punk, right? So punk is lo-fi, high energy, aggression. Not heavy as such, aggression. There's two different things. Aggressive and heavy are two different things. A slow, dirgy, heavy piece of music is not necessarily aggressive, but aggressive, fast music can be heavy. And so, they tear down the barriers and they open up doors. We've already talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I won't go about it again. But from that movement, when that dies off, okay, you get your extreme punk movements with the Exploited and Crass and Extreme Noise Terror and my brother's friend's band, Napalm Death. These bands, and they were really pushing the boundaries. It's particularly Extreme Noise Terror. If you ever get a chance to listen to their stuff, some of it is almost unlistenable, to be fair. And the same with Crass, and I love Crass, but some bits unlistenable. But from that sort of melange of the early 80s, we move into your Iron Maidens, your Judas Priest aren't New Album. I've said this before, because they were formed before 81 or 81, but they're still in the way in that area. You got your Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, your Motorheads, which straddles both the punk and the metal scene, your Saxon, your Scorpion, your Van Halen, and your Venoms, your Satans, and your Praying Mantis, Tigers of Pangtang. I could go on and on about New Album. That it's my favourite genre of heavy metal, but that's that there, which is, I think, the birth of modern heavy. Okay, so you then get this heaviness, and it's so heavy. And this is where I come in, listeners. I'm just going to go and have a break for a second. I'll come back. Got to refresh my tea. Oops, you knocked something over. And then we'll talk about heavy and where I come in. Okay, so go get yourself a drink, get yourself comfortable, have to listen to some ads, spend some money possibly, and we'll see you on the other side, guys. Bye.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New subscribers only. Renew for 12 months to lock in savings. Taxes and fees extra. Additional restrictions apply. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
1-800-Flowers.com is more than your birthday, anniversary, or just because gift-giving destination. We put our hearts into everything we do to help you celebrate all life's special occasions with friends and family. From our farmers and bakers, florists and makers, everything from 1-800-Flowers is made with love every step of the way, because we know that nothing is more important than delivering a smile. To learn more, visit 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST.
Welcome back, guys. New tea, new me. So this is where I come in. When I was walking around listening to Iron Maiden, I've said this before. Those keen listeners will remember that one of my earliest memories is my brother coming back from seeing Iron Maiden at the Sound House, Kingsbury, with Van Halen, both unsigned, and telling me that it was the heaviest, craziest thing he'd ever seen. Now, Ronald was a real punk, so for him to say that, it was quite interesting. I think Andrew may have gone with him. I can't remember. Anyway, that's way back in the midst of time, but that was the earliest time first thing I remember. I then remember Ronald bringing home Iron Maiden's first album and playing it, and me lying on the bed in my because I shared a room with my brother at the time, because there was 5 of us in a 3-bedroom house, and him playing it on his little sort of like Dan set record deck. He didn't have any speakers. It came out the speaker in the front. It's pretty poor now, but it was what it was. We had no money. It's what you could do and what you could get. I remember him playing it, and I remember thinking that this was just insane. Because at that time I was listening to like Jethro Tull and my brother's other record collections, like and also sort of getting into a bit of like the early hip hop stuff, you know, Grandmaster Flash, African Bambaataa, there's some Blondie, of course, Rocksteady Crew. Do you remember them? Hey Ho, the Rocksteady Crew. Do you remember them? God, that's embarrassing, isn't it? My mates used to have this bit of lino out on the street. We lived in a cul-de-sac, and they used to put this lino out on the street, and my mate and Daniel and his other guys used to do like all crazy legs and spinning on their head and windmills and scorpions and all that sort of stuff. Man, it was just crazy, and good times, right? Anyway, that aside, the side of me I haven't thought about for years, but yeah, playing that, and I remember just thinking, okay, well, you know, and it sort of went into my subconscious and disappeared off. It wasn't till I sort of went to high school, and really, again, I mentioned Justin again, but Justin sort of re-sparked my love of loud and heavy. And I remember buying, I'd bought Peace of Mind I'd bought when it came out. Well, I didn't buy it, my brother got it for me for Christmas, and I bought myself, with my own money, I bought Power Slave. And I remember walking, as I said before, walking around the streets, going by this local church on Church Lane in Hendon, and thinking, honestly, I'm going to go to hell. I'm not even Christian, but I thought, I'm going to go to hell. This is the most heaviest. I can see the sunshine. When I listen to that music, I can smell the trees, the grass. I can see what I was wearing. I even know how I felt. It's weird, right? But I was there, and it was the heaviest thing I've ever, right? And for a long time, it was the heaviest thing ever. And I was really getting into the Maidens and the Sabbaths, and Sabbath were the heaviest thing. And you know, it was just, you know, I haven't talked about Sabbath because it's too obvious, but Sabbath, you know, of course, with their slow, dirgy, heavy, rhythmic stuff, the mid-70s onwards, is truly heavy, and people are crying out there, going, yes, talk about Sabbath. I didn't want to talk about Sabbath because it was a bit too obvious, but yes, Sabbath were the heaviest thing in the world, and they were really the sort of first heavy metal band, truly, but they were the sort of first labelled heavy metal band. I was talking about bands that weren't in that, you know, field, but I considered to be heavy. Anyway, and for a long time, you know, that was the case, until one day I was in a squat, living in a squat. When I say living, visiting, staying over for a couple of nights in a squat in Wimbledon when I was at art college, and my mate Mad Melvin, who I've mentioned before, gave me on cassette Venom's At War with Satan, and I hadn't even played it. I mean, I just thought, well, I'll play it one day, and it was in my jacket pocket. I must have just put it in there thinking I'll listen to it. And I think I again can remember the moment. I was walking, when you go from where the house was actually was next door to. She's passed away recently, sadly. Was the wife of Victor Meldrew from One Foot in the Grave. She lived next door. She was lovely. But I was walking from that house to Wimbledon train station, and you have to go across. Anyone that lives in Wimbledon will know this. You got to go across some railway tracks, like a road crossing across tracks. And I remember putting it on there, and I had an inverted cross around my neck. Melvin had given it to me again, because Crazy Melvin was a Satanist, a genuine die-in-the-wall one, proper one. Not these kind of weekend warriors, you know. He really was. I mean, he's not sacrificing babies and drinking the bloods of infants or anything like that. No, he was a genuine anarcho-Satanist. He really was. It was the reason why my wife wouldn't let me, once we had our child, she wouldn't let me visit him or talk to him. She was very scared of him, and I don't blame her from that respect. He was a bit scary, but I liked him. He had a soft spot. He was a nice guy. He was lonely. Anyway, I put it on, and within, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes of the opening of it, I turned it off, put it back in my pocket, put Maiden back on, went, oh, not doing that again. And because I thought, again, like I had that Maiden moment. I thought, shit, going to hell. This really is aggressive and different. And and then I sort of revisited with the lights on. I couldn't listen to it with the lights off, interestingly, in the dark. I just couldn't. I don't know why, I just couldn't. I mean, my house was haunted that I grew up in. That's another podcast, another story. So there were, it was not the easiest place to live. So having that in the background probably didn't help too much. So I tended to find that I would go back to the stuff I would, at that particular time, Headless Cross was coming out, had just come out, and for Black Sabbath, and I was really into Tony Martin. We know that. I love Tony Martin. I was getting to that. And so I went back to sort of the easy listening metal, and God, that's it's one of those monikers that I really hate, like AOR, right? Or Muzak or something. I can't stand those labels. And anyway, that aside, I thought, well, I'll go back to it. So I've gone back to it, and I got really into it. I sort of went for a messy breakup with a girlfriend. I was listening to a lot of Marillion at the time, which I love, of course, but I wanted a nice textural difference, some dark to the light. And Marillion can be heavy. They can be very heavy. Fugazi is a very heavy album. But I sort of thought, okay, I want to try and dabble a bit more. And I met this guy called Mark. Crazy Mark. I'm sorry, I put monikers on them, like crazy, because I've got lots of friends called Mark and lots of friends called Melvin, would you believe? And so I had to sort of, give him a label. And Crazy Mark, he lived on his own. He had a wealthy family. He was the son of a Holocaust survivor who'd luckily managed to raise themselves up with lots of hard work and money, and got themselves a good lifestyle, and they bought him a house. He was the manager of like a B&Q, which is like a Bunnings over here in Australia, a Walmart, I don't know, in America, a DIY store, Home Depot store, and he was absolutely enamored with Kiss. Like he traveled to Japan to buy a record from a dealer because it was the only person in the world that had that record, and it was in Japan. It says it all, really. But he also had this real love of thrash, and this is where I'm going from there. So I went into the next derivation from Venom to me was thrash. And I really got into the, not so much your Megadeths of this world. I'm not a massive fan of Megadeth. Sorry if that's going to make people wail and shout at me, but I'm not a huge fan. I don't like his voice, to be fair. Great guitarist, just like his voice. got into the early Metallicas, and really, let's be honest, Metallica is only Metallica until Cliff Burton sadly passes away. Once he's gone, you might as well call yourself something else. And the Slayers again, and I went more the Slayer, Exodus route, Crocus and stuff like that. I went more that way, where it was really, again, dark and satanic, because I wanted heavier. And where Ride the Lightning and Kill 'Em All is heavy, Rain of Blood is heavy with an exclamation mark and extra H's at the front for me. And so that really fed my my brutality that I wanted, the side of me that was that trod on bugs in the street, you know what I mean, the heavy side of you, your Dr. Jekyll to your Mr. Hyde, and I really loved that, and so I sort of, for a long time, and Mark was really into that, like really into it. Like he got me onto Celtic Frost, and we'll move on to that in a minute, but and so he didn't have any light, did Mark. Mark wasn't, his light was Kiss. He used to laugh at me when I talk about Marillion or wear a Marillion shirt. He'd point fingers at me and snigger, which is a bit unfair, I thought, but hey, we all have our foibles, don't we? I no longer hide under a bushel and say, I don't like Marillion, I love it, I don't care what anyone fucking thinks, to be honest. Beep that one out if you like. Anyway, so Mark then gets me onto the thrash, and that made me think again thinking back at Mark, where music went from sort of your Venoms and your Iron Maidens and your Satans and your stuff like that, which was underground and niche, to this mainstream American. It's easier for music in America to become mainstream because you've got so many millions of you Americans over there, and such big markets. So thrash becomes massive. Okay, again, then I went back to college to do another qualification, and while I was back at college, Black Album came out, and I remember playing Paul in the refectory, thinking, and it came on the radio, and I remember thinking, this is pop music. This is pop music. And isn't that funny? Because I'm thinking the same thing about how I felt about what I said about Maiden a little while ago. This is pop music, because they had commercialized to some extent, and lost also the drive without Cliff. That real heaviness that Cliff had. And so thrash becomes that, and for a little while we're all into that. We went to Anthraxes. We're doing all the. I went and saw Slayer, Anthrax, Helmet, and I can't remember the fourth one at the Hammersmith Odeon. It was called Guitar. It was the night of. Was it the Night of Anarchy? I can't remember. Anyway, it was a really heavy. I remember if you ever went to the old Hammersmith Odeon, you used to have stairs that lead down into the atrium because it used to be a cinema, right? And there were two fractions. There was the fraction one side I was with. I don't know what I was on that left hand side, but I was on the left hand side, and there were guys on the right hand side. And it's all tight jeans and high top trainers and long hair. And I was that warrior. We were chucking M&Ms and Coke and shit at each other. How we didn't get ejected from the building, I don't know. It was a crazy night. Obviously Slayer completely and absolutely melted our faces, but it was mainstream, wasn't it? There was again became a uniform, and people were listening to it, and it came lighter and lighter because it got watered down and more watered down. And what happens there? And I'll be honest, for a period there in the wilderness, I lost track of it, because not many years after that, I got married, I started to raise a family, and music was sort of pushed into the wilderness and pushed backwards behind. It was something that I didn't necessarily, I loved and kept on, but I wasn't as devoted as I am now to it. And then the kids grew up, and things change, and I remember it's probably about 15 years ago, the kids were sort of 10 and 11, and I started back listening to Your Maidens again. I mean, I had buying the albums, but I wasn't, really getting that deep into it. And I remember thinking, and I have to say that I think it's down to my mental state. I was a little bit in a darker place, and so I was looking for that edge, for that killer edge, that something heavier, and I think it became a point where I just wanted really dark, visceral, thick, heavy. And I think it became, I had sort of skipped around the whole church burning stuff in the 90s. I mean, I was aware of it, and I was, certainly interested, because my interest in the paranormal and sort of Satanism and so on, I wasn't overly, I thought it was a bit of a joke, to be fair. Not those people that died. There was some death there and there's some suicide, and I'm clearly not going to make light of that. But the people to produce that music, particularly as it all comes from that colder side of the world, like so your Satyricons and your Behemoths and your Cannibal Corpse and so many of those bands, they became, and the Deicide, although hang on, skip back, sorry, my brain went elsewhere. I did see Deicide at the Astoria. I got a free ticket. Crazy Melvin's mate was a music he was a A&R man, and we went and saw it. I got free tickets. I remember seeing him, Melvin's mate, I can't remember his name now. He was in a suit. I thought it was very strange. I thought he was going to get murdered. And I remember going and seeing them, and there was a wire mesh around the stage, and I couldn't work out why. And then when Glenn Benton comes on with the inverted cross burnt into his forehead, people start chucking lumps of meat at him and pig's heads and innards and stuff. It was just, how the hell they got that into the gig? It was chaos. And we were meant to go backstage to meet them, and I couldn't do it. I was just so terrified, to be honest with you. I was like 18, 19, I think, at the time. Anyway, back again to where I was. So I'm then looking for find more extreme stuff, and I'm really getting into the underground scene, because with the underground scene, there's more extremity, isn't there? Because they have less money, they haven't got the polish, they've got an audience of 50, so fuck them, let's just get out there and be as brutal as possible. And sadly, again, a lot of the extreme music is anti-Christian, anti-religion. I'm not anti-Christian and I'm not anti-religion. I am atheistic. I don't agree with organized religions. Sorry, out there, people. I'm not trying to. If you love God and want to and go to church or synagogue or mosque or whatever you do, and you love, and that's your life, peace, man. Right, brilliant for you. Just me. Organised religions and I had never really stuck together, and so they get more and more dark, and they don't have to worry about selling millions of records, because they just do what they can. And I think a lot of it comes down to inability. I think a lot of those guttural, heavy, as I've said it before, I treat those vocals like an instrument. I think a lot of those singers, male and female, deep down in their soul want to be Bruce Dickinson. Deep down in their soul want to be Rob Halford. And I'm sure in their private world they sing like that to themselves. I do know a few extreme metal vocalists, and they do say it's extremely hard to sing like that, and I absolutely would probably agree with that. Anyway, so I found this underground movement, extreme music. Now this extreme music comes from, as I said, from this hatred of organised religions, this need to be part of and a deep saddened loss for the Celtic religions of or Germanic Celtic religions mostly, and Norway and Germany and Finland, those beautiful religions that organized religion again have crushed over time, be it the Romans, be it Alexander the Great, be it Constantine, whoever, right? It doesn't matter. It's just what it is. And so they're reaching out to get back deep into their heritage, and so they create this music which I think is their heritage, and you know, Nordic and Vikings, and it sort of is, but it sort of isn't, because if they were honest with themselves, those Celtic religions, they didn't have a Satan or a overriding single monotheistic deity which would be good or evil, did they? They didn't. They had many gods and many and they worshipped the cycles of the earth. That's sounding too hippie. So it's sort of what they're doing there themselves is they're grabbing, you know, ironically, I mean, this I find ironically, they're grabbing, you know, Christian dogma and blending it with pagan dogma, which is something that the Christians have done forever. I mean, Christmas is a pagan festival, and it's not even the birthday of Christ. So, you know, so is Easter and so on. Anyway, that aside, different conversation to be had. So I've got into that sort of stuff, really into it. And so now, if you think back, 30 odd minutes ago, 39 minutes ago when I opened this conversation, as I was saying, walking down the street, listening to this music, thinking, this isn't really heavy anymore. How do I feel about that? How do I genuinely feel? And do I wish I'd never discovered extreme music? Sometimes, yes. Because I mean, it's not till you see Maiden live. I mean, again, okay, so you put the record on, it's the sort of thing you could play in a retail environment. I work in retail. It's something you could put in a retail environment that possibly no one would think about. It would play in the background and no one would say anything. But if you put on, you know, a Behemoth album, or Cannibal Corpse, or Deicide, or any of those extreme bands, you know, like what's the one? Something Decapitation, I've gone blank, but Cattle Decapitation and stuff like that. Of course, people are going to stop and turn and look because it's atonal and it's aggressive, and you can't. It has barriers that they don't want to let you in. Whereas Maiden is, come on guys, it's a family, let's get in, let's all sing along. But it isn't until you see Maiden live. I remember the first time I saw them live at Donington, I think it was the heaviest thing. My neck, I mean, just like the last gig, I couldn't move my neck for a week. And I was Deep Heat and Tiger Balm and hot water bottles, Nurofen, Panadol back then, sorry. You know, couldn't move it because it was the heaviest thing. Because heavy isn't always about drop tuning, dirge, cut, you know, fuzz, tritone guitars, you know, very, very fast drumming, guttural vocals. It's, you know, it's not all about that. Heavy, I think now when I think about it, heavy is a state of mind. And it, you know, and I think now on retrospect, this conversation I'm having with you guys, I think I yearn. I think that's it. I'd like to be 14-year-old Tony again, walking past that church, putting on Iron Maiden's a number of the Power Slave, and being just taken away with the aggression. I want to be that 17 to 18-year-old Tony walking from Wimbledon to the train station from the squat to listen to Venom. I really do. I think I'm being sentimental, folks. I really envy the youngsters like my nephew, and I took him to see the Iron Maiden gig at the tribute band the other weekend. He's got his whole life of a discovery ahead of him. Not that we can't discover, not at my age and other listeners, we can't discover, because we can all the time, and I am all the time discovering. I just think that heavy will never really be, I don't understand or know where it could go. I think we've reached a pinnacle if we want to think about heavy anyway. There are only so many notes in the world, and there's only so many ways we can record. And I think that pioneers like King Diamond and Celtic Frost and Venom and Satan and Megadeth, Metallica, Anthrax, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, I could go on and on and on. I think the pioneers have pioneered. Once you've climbed Everest, you've done Everest. Where else is there to go? Mariana Trench, maybe. That's it. We can't go any further. And I think the title of the show, as I said, is When Heavy Becomes Extreme. And for me, extreme came, really, when I think back at it, extreme came in night when I was first put on Power Slave. And beyond that, it just became heavier and heavier, and then it went a bit lighter, and then heavier and heavier. It was like same with the punk scene, same with when punk became hardcore in America, and then hardcore become metalcore, and all the subgenres you want to shake your stick at. It's all the same when it comes down to it. It's all forms of heavy. Anyway, that's my music. That's where I'm coming from, and I feel melancholic about it, to be fair. That's why I love my company of circle of friends like Benji, who will be on the show. I keep saying he's not threatening to be on the show, but he will be. You've just got to find time to get him on. He's a good example. He listened to Metallica a lot as a youth. I first met him, he was listening to Ghost. Well, good Ghost, you can't blame him for that. I won't hold that against him. I was drawn in as well. I was listening to Ghost at the same time. And then, I sort of got him into the punky, heavier punk, and he loves the Misfits, and they're very aggressive and heavy. But I got him onto the darker, blacker stuff, and Alande he got me onto, and he's always getting me onto new stuff. Honestly, every week I get my phone will ping, and it'll be Benji with listen to this, and it's something completely new, something completely dark. He's so open-minded. John's the same, lovely John. He's not a heavy man himself. He likes his prog and he's heavier, sort of like your Sabbaths and stuff like that. But he's listening to the stuff via the podcast, and I'm really impressed and proud that he's opening his mind a bit. So I hope you do have your Tony moment, have your tone moment, have your all out there. If you can think back to your moment when heavy became extreme, and if it hasn't become extreme yet, reach out and try it. It won't hurt you. You've got Spotify, you've got Apple Music, you've got all YouTube, you've got everything you can now that doesn't cost you any extra, and it won't take any of your time up. So reach out and see that if heavy for you can become extreme, and if it becomes extreme, how far you go. I'd love to know. I'd love to know if you've tried it, couldn't do it, and went back. I think it just opens up a whole new avenue, a whole new diversity to get into, a whole new way of looking at music, in its ethos, its imagery, its drive, and its beauty. And there is beauty in extreme music. There's beauty in brutality, and it's there. You just have to see it. You have to sort of understand it, and that can be the boundary of which people can't cross. But anyway, be safe. Try it only if you can. Don't go where you can't. And if not, fall back. There's always Maiden. There's always Maiden. forever and ever. Amen. Anyway, that's me. I've gone on to almost 50 minutes. I love this conversation. It's a conversation that's been in my head, running round and round and round for a very long time. So, keep safe, keep well, keep listening. Please do come over to my Facebook page now, Heavy Metal Tones. You can message me, have a chat, ask me some questions, give me some feedback. Give me feedback on the show on Spotify and on iTunes. It does help other people to see the show. We are getting, I am getting phenomenally good numbers coming through. Excuse me. Excuse me. Seamless edit. That went down the wrong hole. Oh dear. Anyway, I'm not dying, guys. Cold tea can go the wrong way. Anyway, I'm about to go. So, I'm going to go and write some more reviews for Metal Ruse. I'm back on that. I've got to get back to that. I just finished one for the new Livewire album, which is a Sydney new wave of thrash album, a band. Please do check them out. Great album, great singers. Vocals a bit under-recorded, but hey, we'll see that in the review. Either way, I'm rambling, only because I just love talking to you. Bye, guys.